Hey there, this is Perch. Talking a little bit about comics and what can increase their value. This question has come up a few times. Well, a couple questions around this. So I'm going to kind of collect them all and answer them all at once from a retailer perspective and just what I've seen in terms of what people purchase and don't purchase. A comic, you get a comic on the shelf, it's in good shape. Hopefully, it's in good shape. You're bagging it, you're boarding it, you're protecting it nicely. So, what do how much is it worth, and how does that comic get more worthwhile? So, first off, I think you have to think about any comic and anything that you're buying. Is this an investment that you're hoping to flip one day, or is this something for you as kind of a memory? Where are you sitting with this comic book? Because it's really going to guide kind of how you're going to treat it ultimately and what you're going to do with it. First off, bagging and boarding, of course, is a good idea. That keeps your comic in good shape and in nice positioning. Bagging and boarding is not like putting your comics in, like freezing them in amber, and they're going to be perfect forever, though. There's different qualities of boards. Recently, I know a couple people have bought boards off of Amazon, and there's a couple resellers or retailers, I don't know, providers. There's some providers of boards where the board is of a flimsier quality, and the little coating on the board flakes onto the comic. And so be careful of that. If you have a board where like one side is coated and the other side is not, which is something that we've seen, that can deteriorate the bag over time. I'm talking in the 10-year, 20-year time frame. It can start to kind of rot out the back of the bag, and then it has an effect if you have your comics in a long box where the comic in front will start to destroy the comic in back. It takes a long time for that to happen, but it can happen. The other thing we see is that if you bag it and you board it, and then you really cram your comics into the long box, you can compress the comics to a point where the pages are getting compressed more than the staple will allow, and that will cause some bending and some creasing on the side. So that's something that we'll just watch out for. But bagging and boarding, typically good idea. Definitely helps preserve the comic. But then comes the question about signatures. So if you get a signature on your comic, does that increase the value? And the answer generally is yes, but there's a few caveats there. First, there have been a lot of forgeries out there. There have been a lot of fake signatures that have been done. So you have to make sure you've got one that's graded or that has been verified. A good idea if it's you going to a con and you're getting the comic signed is to see if you can take a picture with the creator, and in most cases people do get their pictures taken with the artist or the writer or whoever, is to print out a little picture of that, print out that picture and just drop it into the bag and the board. Just include it in with the comic. And that way, it's not foolproof, of course, but if you're ever questioned about it or if there's any need for validation, you have your comic, you have it signed, and you have this little picture of you with the comic and the creator, and that tends to answer all questions. There's not a the signature, the forgery signature market, if you will, is lessened quite a bit. It just doesn't exist as much, but it's something to watch out for. Then on top of that, the signature itself, if the signature is to you, like some creators will sign the comic to your name, or to, thanks for reading, your name, and then the signature is done. That tends to be problematic because it does lessen the value, certainly, because now it's changed from just an autograph or a signed copy to more of a personal bit of memorabilia. You have this comic says, "Hey Steve, thanks," vaguely. It won't have the same kind of hold up, and some collectors will buy them anyway, but it that tends to really put people off if you're hoping to flip the comic later one day. Um, I've seen lots of people say, well, what about the signature on the cover? Does it matter where it sits? Should it be over the art? I honestly haven't seen any kind of difference there. Some creators go nuts and kind of cover up a third of the comic with their signature. Others, have a tiny little signature. It really doesn't matter. That obscuring parts of the cover for an autograph is not a big deal. Some pins can be a problem. I remember that one creator is using a like a Sharpie marker, like a really intense Sharpie marker, and they were signing the covers, and it was bleeding through to the next page. That had an impact, certainly on resale value. The other part of it is, getting your comic actually graded, going to a service and getting it formally graded. That is definitely helpful if the comic you have in your hand is one that's going to be worth, several $100s or more. It's not worth going to get a lot of comics, graded and formally approved if the in value is going to be like 50, $60. It's just not. It doesn't really matter. It won't do much for you when you try and flip it. May make it slightly easier, may add a couple dollars to the equation, but I mean, we're talking about like, Superman #1, Batman #1, the first issue of Detective Comics. One the kind of the determining line is, complete mint, autographed, by Rob Liefeld, New Mutants, first appearance of Cable. Yeah, that's one you'd want to get graded. That's one that you'd want to preserve in a maybe a better case, a better backer and board. That's the kind of the line. Other things, not so much. The challenge with a lot of the relaunches is it really has deteriorated the whole kind of #1 market for, I'd say, the last 20 years at least, since we've been in the new century. #1s just do not have the same kind of appeal, and there's been so many turned over. So even if you get it autographed, somebody guy was really happy, went to get kind of the new Avengers #1 signed by, got it signed by Jason Aaron. Um, doesn't really do much. The autograph is certainly valuable. You can get into maybe the teens, 20s with that issue, but it's not going to do a whole lot. You have to go further back with a lot of that stuff. But overall, the kind of the end message or the summary to all this is, you know, hopefully, if you're buying comics, you're buying them because you love them, because you're happy with them, because you like the story. It's doing something for you as a person. It's a hobby you love. If you're a pure collector, pure speculator, I mean, it's like playing. Now it's probably better, but it's like playing slots in Vegas. You're making gambles and you're doing the best you can. So to you, it's an investment. All these kinds of details probably matter a lot. If you're in that world, then having a $4 to $5 price difference because you have it graded may be of value to you because you have dozens of these comics there. I will say the fastest way to irritate collectors, or sorry, fastest way to irritate creators, if you show up at a con and you've got like 50 books there and they're like all the same, like I've got 50 copies of this one issue of Avengers, and I'm kind of pushing it on, the artist to sign them all. That's going to irritate the the creator pretty quickly. Some will do it, but it's very apparent you're flipping these. And maybe that doesn't matter. Again, if you're a speculator, collector, don't really care about the industry, then maybe it doesn't matter to you. Who cares what the creator thinks? But in general, that's known as kind of a dick move, and the people behind you in line are certainly not appreciating what you're doing. But anyway, that's kind of the general scope of it. I mean, the funny thing is, no matter what you've got, things that hold up value, things that are good in the shop that have good resale values, when you have runs of things, when you have a complete kind of issue 1 to issue 6 of a storyline in a comic that's a few years old, decade old, that kind of stuff goes better. And if you're selling, having a complete run or a complete kind of listing of what you've got tends to do better. You can generally get a couple dollars more out of your collection. And the reason being is people come into shops and they're looking for back issues. And while it's true there are collectors and speculators that come in looking for that one special issue, more often than not, it's people coming in and they're looking for the run. They're looking for a set of comics. Maybe they're looking to complete their run. They're missing a couple issues out of it, but in a lot of cases, people are coming in. They're trying to get a set of comics. So if you can kind of align to that need, I think that helps out a lot. And I'll also say if you're going to a comic shop, there's nothing wrong at all. In fact, I think appreciated by most, rather than like hauling in your short box or bunch of stack of comics, just write them down and go in and say, hey, I've got these. to the best of your ability. They're mint, near mint. They're all bagged and boarded. This one's autographed. You have like a list on a paper. That's generally more helpful to a lot of shops to be able to look at and say, okay, yeah, and you can get a quote out and you can get kind of some assessment for your comics, and that's a good way to go. So I'd recommend that. Just if you're short on time or whatever, helps everybody, and then you come back with the comics, and it's a cleaner transaction. But anyway, that's it. That's kind of the sum of it. Comic grading and quality and autographs, and what if it's still in the bag that it was originally shipped in? All these kinds of things. I mean, I didn't hit on that, but of course it goes without saying if the comic in question is a bagged comic or one with a trading card or something kind of along with it, then it's always best to have it complete, have it still in the bag, have it unopened. That's always, of course, going to be best. If you have opened it, hopefully you did so neatly and you've got the bag still there with the comic. Maybe it's X-Acto knife split down the top, and you've still got the cards, whatever kind of assembled. You've got a full package. People who are wanting to buy the comic are going to want it as close to its original quality as possible, which means still bagged, or at the very least, still with all its components. But you will take a hit if you've opened it, of course. Anyway, I hope this answered some questions. A little kind of short video, but there you go. That's more or less how it goes. How do you? Are you a collector? Are you a speculator? Do you just read comics for fun and hope that one day you get some money out of it? Kind of where do you sit with all that? Let me know. Leave your comments below, and follow, subscribe, notify, all that jazz. Follow me on social media, Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.